Thanks to Ravi for having me here. I told Ravi that it's not going to necessarily be a very interesting talk. Most people think that growth is this amazing combination of extreme deep learning, AI, and some magic to make it happen, but largely it's just common sense. And he was saying that more than enough, just talk about common sense and people will be excited. I doubt that, because if that's the case, there's some problem, right? So I'm going to basically talk about how we look at growth at PhonePe, and it's a bunch of learnings that we've had over the last little over 3 years that the product has been live. It has been an amazing journey from a scale perspective. While you do see, I'm pretty sure, PhonePe at a lot of the outlets as an acceptance point, we are also a platform that is powering a whole bunch of use cases. And just for context, user base is close to around 200 million now. Customer base, which is basically lifelong customers, are more than 100 million. And daily we drive more than 20 million transactions. Transactions being actual money that somebody is remitting to somebody or somebody is paying for some use case. And that in 3 years is a phenomenal journey, and it's come through a lot of learnings, hard learnings. What I'm going to cover here is just the philosophy. I will share some examples through the talk, some data, but feel free to ask me even questions. Yeah. So the topic that I chose was going for growth the right way. Generally, growth can be bought, easiest way. Most people do think that that's what we also do with a lot of cashback. We do it, but we do it a little more intelligently is what I'd like to believe. That we burn significantly lower than a lot of other folks. But buying your growth or buying your way through growth is obviously not sustainable. Probably the only way to start in some cases. I think with platforms like MoEngage and partners like them, you don't have to do that even at the start. And you can actually benefit from a lot of aggregations that they do for you in this space. But otherwise, it's one way to start, but it's definitely not the way to continue. You can eke out growth. That is basically where you can bludgeon your user with communication after communication, email blast, SMS blast, DN blast, and take whatever bleed over that you get from those poor users who are still clicking on those. Right? That is the other way. Or you can actually earn your growth. I think the right way to do this is to try and earn your growth, which means that put a significant amount of effort and not just money in driving growth and whatever those metrics may be. So the idea is to take you through how to earn your growth and do it in a manner that is sustainable. Basically a bunch of talking points on the slide, so feel free to ignore that and feel free to ask questions, like I said. So growth principles, again a lot of common sense, but I'll take you through some of these things and how we look at it at PhonePe and why we believe that is extremely important to anchor these as first principles for growth or driving growth within your company. First one, very, very obvious, measure everything. Second one, very obvious, have control groups and systemic A/B frameworks. The reason that I put these out there is while everybody knows about it, nobody really invests deep enough to make this the only way that you operate, right? You have to actually have parallel teams or every team in the company sensitized to the fact that instrumentation and capturing data is not optional. Because most of the time what you do discover is that unless you do that campaign by campaign or tactical effort wise, you do realize and you start adding instrumentation there, and that's always suboptimal, always. So unless you culturally move to trying to actually drive this, that irrespective of whether you're part of the growth team, the CRM team or the core team, every team needs to actually start contributing towards data signals that may or may not be used immediately but will be used. That cultural shift is extremely important, and that's basic principles and common sense that the company needs to actually move towards. Having a philosophy of having control groups, again, irrespective of whether you're actually running some sort of a campaign for growth, that is important, or it's just another regular campaign that you're running, you must actually always have your control experiments running. Because as you grow as a platform, your consumers also are growing with you. They are evolving, right? Your use cases are evolving. So what you believe about your consumer base on a particular use case or category today does not apply 6 months out, forget even a year, at the rapid growth that some of the platforms, at least like us, are seeing. So therefore the reality keeps changing. If the reality changes, make sure that your control experiments are again a standard procedure across all your efforts on growth. Understanding cannibalization is extremely important. I think a lot of people miss this, right? And most of the time it is about what I call as the immediate vanity metric of a particular campaign that you're after. You look at a possible uplift that you can get, you go after it with horse blinders, saying that, hey, let's actually design this campaign, let's define this cohort which is going to have the maximum conversion, and then let's go for it with whatever channels that we may have. Maybe it is inline experiences, it's push notifications, etc. I think nobody necessarily tries to pay attention and look at the data to see what is the level of cannibalization that you have. As we've grown as a platform, most people tend to think of some of the more, what I call as roti kapda makan use cases. Recharge, bill payment, peer-to-peer money transfers as pretty much commodity. The belief may be that externally it is not something consumers are habitual to, right? And therefore, you have to keep feeding the monster to keep the monster growing. That is actually not true. If you do realize there is a segment that continuously is moving towards what we call as convenience and trust, and you need to keep measuring what that segment size is, who are there in that segment, and what can you do to over-index or accelerate that movement. That will only come in if you start studying how cannibalization does happen, how much it is there, and start extrapolating that. Because those are the consumers that you should actually start including in the buckets of what we call as the probables and the loyals. And don't necessarily spend on them to actually create repeat transaction, but spend on them or invest in them to create loyalty. That is a shift from what we call as intervention-based growth to influencing growth. And influencing growth is basically to start understanding who are these probables that will ultimately become the loyals, and what is the behavior you want to influence them on, rather than say that category by category or use case by use case you want to intervene. So interventions are necessary only up to a certain point of the, what I would say, velocity of a consumer or a user on your platform. At what velocity you start making sure that you move to starting to influence behavior will only come if you start analyzing the data to understand cannibalization or not. Right? That's why that point is extremely important for us. I'll show you a next slide, dumb slide, but at least it will graphically illustrate what I mean by this. The next one is differentiate between temporary outcomes and long-lasting behavioral changes. Most of the metrics that all of us chase are vanity metrics, right? You'll have, I just count the number of transactions that we do on a daily basis. Vanity metric. If those transactions are coming from a handful of users, it's useless, right? I just count about the number of users that we have, close to 200 million. If most of them are not transacting, it's pretty much useless. It's a vanity metric. Sounds great, right? I'm pretty sure somewhere the CEOs, the CTOs, the founders are pushing you for getting these numbers because yes, it's important. They do have board meetings, they do have investor discussions, they have the next fundraise coming along. Fact is that it's important to all, I'm not saying you don't focus on those metrics, I think they're very important. They are outcome metric that you need to aspire towards, but it's not the metric that's not the only metric you need to aspire towards. What you need to do is balance that with a fair share of what I call as the input metrics. In our case, it would be the number of unique transacting customers and what is the ratio of those to users. For a platform like us, it should be fairly simple. Every user should be a customer. Definition of a customer is basically somebody who is remitting some money, either for a peer-to-peer transfer or for a merchant transaction, whether it is in-app, whether it's in the offline space, whether it's as a PG model on online, it doesn't matter. The fact is that if there is a user on PhonePe who is not transacting, there is very less value of that user, or the reverse. I am adding very less value to the life of that user. So the convergence of one, the number of active, unique transacting customers and the convergence of that to my users on a daily basis, what I call as DAC to DAU, daily active customers to daily active users, is a metric that is a very, very healthy metric. It's a metric that basically brings out both number of uniques that are coming in, and this further segmented by repeat and new, right? The way to look at all of these is to ensure that all your efforts are towards improving these input metrics, and the output, whether it's transaction, whether it's volume, whether it's number of visits, it's number of sessions, is basically an output metric. Very difficult to actually create this input metric, grow the input metric and not see output value. Very easy to actually throw money and create the output value and see that your input metrics are actually unhealthy. Therefore, to differentiate what is sustainable growth and what is not a temporary outcome but structural change. Long lasting means structural change, right? Bringing about structural change with every growth campaign is extremely important. That's what we look at our campaigns with. That's the lens that we take. This is my favorite one actually. Most of the time I use data, I hear data sciences being used as the buzzword to basically say that we use data sciences, we use ML, and even better we use AI to actually drive conversion, retention, loyalty, open rates, etc. Depending on the life cycle of the product and depending upon the size of the consumer base that you have on your platform, data sciences can actually have either a negative effect or suboptimal at best, if not very good. You have to actually, most of the time, a lot of our product has not gone through the hygiene level to actually fix for issues that data sciences cannot fix for. It's basically product common sense. If you start applying data sciences to that, you will actually get suboptimal results, because what they're going to do really is try to look at what is the behavior of consumers on your platform and then try to actually see how can they drive that particular behavior either to some sort of lookalike models of other consumers. The fact is, if for example we had a point in time when our onboarding funnels were extremely leaky, right? And it didn't take rocket science for somebody to look at all the follow-ups, all the kind of product idiosyncrasies that we had actually put in, the number of hurdles that we had artificially created, the amount of over-education that we are doing for a customer, which was having a negative effect. Without cleaning that, the ones that you're actually basing your product growth on for data sciences are the really hardened souls who somehow or the other came into this funnel, took a lot of effort and made it through the gates, right? That is not the reflection of the consumer base that you want to actually bring in, and having data sciences there is ridiculous. Secondly, there is a certain level of interaction and size that you need to have to actually ensure that data sciences gives good results, right? Most of these require a fair volume of engagement from a user in a particular use case before it becomes valuable. So trying to actually right fit when to actually bring intelligence, as we call it, through data versus when to actually look at your product and continue to plug away at product goodness is an extremely important thing. So we have a very strong guardrail in terms of what are our categories or use cases that we believe are ready for data science intervention. Right? This does not apply for growth and some of the targeting that we do at a global level, but it does apply for a lot of the new use cases. If we launched liquid funds in the mutual funds category very recently, we do have a sense of what is our consumer base that has interest there, but we're not necessarily going to try and drive a lot of them into that funnel until we have enough volumes through that funnel to learn that it is good enough to be able to actually optimize through data sciences. And finally, a scientific temperament. I think on the growth side specifically, we underplay the scientific temperament and the level of research that you need to keep doing in order to stay ahead of the game, right? Whether it is about operational research, whether it's about understanding the marginal ROI that you're getting from the spends that you're doing across various channels, the space itself is evolving very fast and there's a fair amount of research there. Having that temperament to continue to read and read deeply in terms of how others are operating that space is extremely important. So don't make it a habit to growth hack on the growth side always. Make it also a habit to actually start going deep through enough research, because it will actually give you a step jump that growth hacking will never give. So those broadly are the common sense principles that we really apply when it comes to growth at PhonePe, right? It's pretty much like the pillars that we use, and we actually govern. We look at a lot of campaigns pre and post with this lens to ensure that this hygiene is maintained, because if this is maintained, then life becomes much easier. Then we believe that when if we are spending or if we are consuming mind share of our users. That's the most important thing, right? Because with every interaction of the user, you're consuming mind share from the user. At least we're not worried whether we are actually consuming that mind share for nothing. We are consuming that mind share with knowledge that these have been adhered to, so we are putting our best foot forward. That's basically the philosophy around how we look at growth. So, outcome of something like this is this. Very dumb slide, please forgive me for this. I had to remove the numbers. No slide, a slide without numbers is actually useless, so it's only illustrative. You just have to believe that I'm not a liar and these are in billions and this isn't really point something or some paise, right? But the thing is that one of the ways we look at it, and by the way, this is not the right metric. I wanted to put the other slide in, I did it on the way here in the car, but that had just too many numbers for me to remove. So I was feeling lazy. The right metric that to look at is how many repeat customers and how many repeat users for particular use cases against the kind of spend that we are doing. The reason I've chosen these use cases, recharge, online merchants and offline merchants, again, typical outside in view would be highly commoditized. A PhonePe for recharge, how different is it from a Paytm for recharge? Right? I'm pretty sure everybody will say no different. PhonePe for payments in the online space, how different? One gives more cashback or the other gives more cashback. That's the only difference. Offline, what's the difference? Yet, and therefore economies of scale don't come in naturally, given how competitive we are. This is the world where PhonePe is competing not just with Paytm, it's competing with Google, right? There is Amazon Pay out there, then there are the banks trying to actually match up, then there is Facebook trying to threaten coming in. So it's not, it is probably the most hyper-competitive market that India has ever seen, right? Like commerce, 2 players, food, maybe 2 players, 3 players. Here it is the finals of the poker table. Everybody who has money is here, right? So in a hyper-competitive market, you would expect that these categories have a significant spend continuously, but this is reality. Just by using those principles, we've been able to actually ensure that we have high repeat. That one, again, take my word, also has unique customers in a similar trending graph, if not better, for transactions, because our repeats from our customers also are high, so we're getting a lot of new customers, right? So it is the way to look at growth. How do I actually continue to grow in a sustainable manner, and what are the metrics I focus on to balance what I call as the output metrics with the input metrics? Yeah. So how do we apply that philosophy, right? So we have a clear customer lifecycle. It obviously reach, then onboard, habituate, retain, and then drive loyalty. The important thing though is that this is actually a circular reference and not necessarily a stepwise growth of a consumer through the PhonePe platform. Simple reason is PhonePe is, for most people, if I ask what is PhonePe, right? I've asked this, I asked a lot of people, it's not an easy answer. One, payment gateway is the most common answer. Second one is money transfer. Then somebody says recharge and bill pay. Somebody says transaction platform, I use it for multiple use cases. But the very fact is that today, for the number of things that we do and the way we do it in terms of having a very open ecosystem, having a partnership model where we don't do every use case or category by ourselves, but we ensure that we bring in partners on board. We have a model of where we actually share our user base and our customer base through different engagement models for transacting on the PhonePe platform. It is a complex beast. So a consumer who is, for example, habituated on peer-to-peer money transfers is not necessarily already a habituated user for financial services. That assumption itself is flawed. Yes, they are significantly better off from a trust index. They're significantly better off from understanding the platform and the basics of how to actually complete a transaction. But the fact is that it is a stretch to say that I do my 100 rupee recharge and therefore I'm going to do my 10,000 rupee investment also on PhonePe, right? That person who's on the habituated on the recharge part is obviously a few steps ahead of the new person who's coming into our funnel. But the fact is that we have to relook that person from the same lens of how to onboard him onto, say, financial services. What are the possible behavioral changes we need to actually engineer for that particular user to habituate him towards this, and then say that we can actually retain and make him a loyal customer for this particular vertical. So the way we look at these is While it is not a step forward journey for a consumer across the platform. It is basically a step forward journey across what we call as each of the pillars for PhonePe, right? The pillars of PhonePe are, the pillars themselves are step journey. So the way we look at our consumer journey on the PhonePe platform is send money, spend money, manage money, and grow money. Our job is to say that every user needs to come in through send, and then we have to graduate them to a spend. As we actually graduated to send and spend, build velocity, and through velocity trust with them to use the platform. Then say that what is it that we can do with money management for you. And by the way, if you now trust us to manage your money, let us also help you with making your money work for itself, either by protecting your interests, either by giving you liquidity when you need, or by saying that we can invest for you, right? That is a linear journey, but within that linear journey, this is a constant cycle at every foundational piece. That's how we look at it, and we don't take any user, therefore, for granted. We may have a cohort as our habituated cohort or our frequency cohort at the topmost level, but we don't take it for granted and just say that just because this is the habituated cohort, everything that we introduce, this person is going to anywhere at all. So let's either opt him out, opt him in, never make those decisions. Ground zero, each time you're launching a completely new ecosystem or vertical on a platform play. That's broadly the learning. So I'll try to go through each one of these in a little bit of more nuance, and I'll give more examples of how we do it at PhonePe or what are the learnings. So from a reach perspective, right? Reach is basically simple. I'm sure most of you all are pretty much actually much better than me on this. It is basically a portfolio play across your various channels, right? You have to actually continuously evaluate based on the life stage of the product, what is the efficacy of a particular channel and what is the ROI on that. Therefore, this is where I think a very strong research bent and having OR principles very, very strong, your operational research principles being very strong, becomes extremely useful, right? Simple theory that we have seen that as our brand index keeps going up, the need to necessarily spend through a bunch of channels like Google, Facebook keeps going down. Therefore, do not continuously keep a lens on that, because you'll suddenly realize that for the last so many months, your ROI is so marginal on some of the channels on digital marketing that you could have better spent that in terms of retention on the platform itself versus continuing to actually be trying to actually guide users to install through, say, a Google or Facebook. So the inflection point of marginal ROI, what is the input and what is the output? Output again can be measured in multiple ways. Whatever is your primary metric is a very important factor, and say that. So we've kind of completely transformed ourselves to move significantly towards referral, for example, because of the spend on brand. So the way we look at it is you spend less on brand initially because you don't have the right product market fit. You start spending across these various channels so that you bring enough velocity into the product to actually refine the product market fit. As the product market fit improves, you start investing in brand, and therefore there will be an inflection point at which your spend in brand should be sufficient for you to actually attract the highly non-attributable top of the funnel, and therefore start moving most of the other dollars into in-app use cases for retention, right? That is the overall problem, right? Theory of constraints that you need to apply across. It's a multivariate problem on which you have to determine at every step where your portfolio management is going to be involved. The other very important thing is lifetime value of the user or customer. Very, very difficult to define early on. It takes a fair amount of data, fair amount of engagement before you can actually determine how exactly you will measure the LTV. But once you have a measure of your lifetime value of the customer, start taking that lens to the historical base that you've actually acquired through the various channels. Our learning has been that it has been very, very distinct for these cohorts. A consumer coming in from channel A, let's say Facebook, versus a Google search, behaves very differently or slightly differently from an LTV perspective, and therefore also differently as an influencer, right? The influencers, so each segment basically has what we call as our primaries who act as influencers for that channel. Identify the primaries, look at the LTV of the primaries, look at their influential behavior, and make that another constraint into your spend. Has been extremely effective for us. Onboard, right? So onboard is very interesting. This has been something that we've actually learned the hard way. We were going at our users from trying to actually onboard them with anything and everything that we had on PhonePe for the longest period of time, right? And then realized that set up a user in the simplest possible manner for what you believe that user will do. This is where with enough amount of data, intelligence comes into play after your onboarding funnels are scrubbed. Once we scrubbed our onboarding funnels, scrubbing our onboarding funnels means that we broke it up. We modularized it significantly. We actually built out onboarding that was contextual to a user, right? It's very difficult because when you onboard a user, you really don't know much about the user to make it contextual, but you can apply act volume, certain amount of science to say that this person falls under the bucket where it is okay to actually onboard them on module 1, 3 and 5 and don't take them to the entire 1 to 5, right? So whether it's linking a bank account, whether it is saving a card, whether it is trying to get the KYC done for the wallet, whether it's trying to get the KYC plus that is done for investments in mutual funds, whether it is about also trying to get the details that are needed for something like insurance. Actually the list is endless. Profile completion, value of profile completion for different categories is extremely different. So we actually had onboarding that over time became fairly complicated. On top of that, we added enough of education to the user to tell the user exactly why they are doing this, like the user cared, right? Realization was that keep the onboarding extremely simple. At the same time, design our systems in such a way it's completely server driven for the app to be able to actually determine what to do for a particular user. And those come from various things. Referral is a classic thing. If a person is coming in through a referral channel, our ability to get more done from that user on the onboarding is significantly more than if it is a cold call that is coming through Google. So if we design our systems in such a way that we are able to differentiate and drive that behavior from the server contextually on the app, that as a system is a big win for us. Then you start looking and saying that once that is done, what are the points in time at which you start introducing the behavioral changes for the user to complete something, right? KYC for financial services, like I said, the philosophy is grow, comes after send, spend, manage. There is no reason for us to try and achieve that kind of completion anytime in the initial life cycle. Just basic data analysis has shown for us that after the 4th peer-to-peer money transfer to a unique person, there is a significant baseline shift towards the habitualness of a person on the platform itself and their tolerance to be introduced to new use cases. Otherwise, until then, the inertia to say I'm going to try anything else on PhonePe, even with the entire brand spend that we have, is very, very low. Those are the kind of things that we need to actually honor and ensure the onboarding is a simple setup and is broken down through the life cycle to be able to actually introduce at different points. So, and again, basically the funnels that we analyze, like I said, we actually use, this is the area we actually use a fair amount of ML right now to be able to understand what are the kind of users and what is their affinity for a particular category and therefore their intentions towards completing something like a KYC, which is extremely intrusive, right? But the reason that we need to do that is trying to do something like that at the point of sale means a significant drop-off. Trying to get something like that done when you do have the mindshare of the users and the time to spare makes that particular sale at that point significantly easy. So the message to somebody saying that you are completely KYC and it's a single click for you to invest in a mutual fund is a much more powerful message. Therefore, we actually try to decouple those two and we look at a fair amount of lookalike models and data to see who are the users at which point in time they will actually do this out of bank. Right? At that point, they don't necessarily have a reason, but we do create. And for those users, when we bring up what we call as the jaundice strip on PhonePe, this ugly yellow strip that comes up sometimes for certain users, suddenly has seen an extremely high engagement. Counterintuitive, it's a very ugly strip, and our design team has not got to fixing that. But we try to introduce those. So we have this concept of a jaundice strip that comes up, and we actually measure the effectiveness of that. Not outside of the color, on how much we are actually getting engagement on that because it's highly contextual. This is a very important one for us, right? Habituating a particular user on anything, any behavior. It doesn't matter. It doesn't necessarily have to be even transactional. It could be into something like doing bank balance checks on a certain frequency, because that is the kind of warm and fuzzy that actually makes the consumer fairly sticky to the platform. It is not about whether they are able to transact, send money or pay. It is about the fact that whether they are able to use us very, very easily to even check their bank balance anywhere and whenever that they want, right? So it is about any engagement, and we look at these from particular use cases. It is very important to actually break down making a consumer habitual only after you've got the right depth and breadth on the product. Otherwise, it is like beating a donkey to death. You can keep trying to tell the consumer, use this, use that, nudge them, have intelligence to try and say, you will do this next. If your product market fit isn't right, and your breadth and depth of use case isn't right, it is useless, because even the spend is useless in that case. So a very important precursor is to ensure that you have the breadth, you have the depth, and you have the validation of consumer lock-in on this before you go intelligent on any of these. So a feature richness, this is basically where product has to contribute significantly towards growth, right? That is a demand growth teams have to have from product, and product has to actually sign up, product and engineering, to say that what are the right set of levers that you have to actually build habit around for the user. So for us, it's obviously been balance checks, auto pay, simple reminders that don't even have anything to do with the transaction, right? We have reminders just to say that, say hi to a cook with chat. It doesn't matter. There are certain things that drive daily engagement and value to the user, irrespective of whether it's driving necessarily direct value to the platform. Define those, get a fair amount of data analysis done to ensure that that does create a certain level of engagement. The way we look at this metric is, if there are 10 typical spends, we have identified what we call as the 10 typical spends a day. One, is PhonePe an option for all those 10 typical spends? This again varies by geography and cut, but that is a very important thing for us, whether we are an option or not. After we are an option, what are the set of users that actually use this for at least 8 of them? Where we have said that we are the choice in 80% of the typical spends that are there on a daily basis. Get that going. If that is achieved on the what we've achieved on the PhonePe platform, we then take a view of that being our habitual segment against the typical spends. These come in the send and spend vertical, and then we try to actually over-index on trying to say, now let's identify out of the 200 million who are the set to invest behind to actually mirror these habituals, right? For that we have what we call as, so we have a platform that we call as Yatra as journey, right? It basically tracks every user's interaction with the platform on, it's not a click basis, it's an interaction basis. When the person came in, when did they finish the profile, what was the use case that they did, what was the repeats, right? And we have padaws. Padaws are defined based on cohorts, right? These are dynamic cohorts that we create, dynamic distribution lists that we've identified for different types of users, habituals, super habituals, probables, probables on the lower end, etc. Based on this, we have what we call as interventions defined within Yatra to be able to actually just in time either do a gentle nudge or do an aggressive reminder for a particular use case towards the metric that we call as CPC, categories per customer, which is basically our 80% achievement. So Yatra plays an extremely important role for us. It's one of the biggest investments that we've done from a scale perspective outside of chat and our entire node directory of all contact users. Took us a good 8 months to be able to actually build it out right. Basically, it's a real-time resolver against dynamic models with the capability to actually do live tracking of a user at the scale that we are at. That investment has paid huge dividends. We are able to now do inline nudges to actually move as many of who we call as the probables into the habituals. And CPC is the metric that we do, categories per customer. Retention. Again, one of the key things to see how many repeats that we have, again from a customer. We don't look at user as, none of our metrics by the way are based on whether user is there, whether a session is there. It is always based on customer, because anyway the goal is to take customer to user at a daily level, at a monthly level, at a weekly level, etc. So, but very important thing for us again here was ensuring that So we had this time when we started 3 years back with a whole bunch of dumb offers. We were spraying and praying, basically, that people come on the platform, and obviously had extremely suboptimal results. At the same time, we had another negative effect that outside of what we call as the greedy customers, who will only come in for seeking a deal, who now get automatically weeded out, the ones who would have been the loyal customers also get pissed off because our ability to actually service them was extremely poor, right? Payments and offers or rewards are two areas where we have spent the maximum amount of time to actually automate every service and support interaction that the consumer has for those two verticals. Any ticket that is based on an offer, I didn't get a cashback, my coupon code is already used, etc., are completely automated from the perspective of response through the bot, right? All other use cases are not yet, but these were prioritized. Because the negative effect of having something like that, where you have you have incentivized a particular action, that action has come at the cost of somebody genuinely spending money on your platform, and then them being gypped of something that you've promised, there isn't a more negative thing that you can do for your customer base, right? So not having the right service and support layer that is automated. You have to automate because at scale it is impossible to run a call center or take tickets and have your on-call team fix it, was the realization. So we spent enough time there, and only then we started ramping up on what we call as personalized rewards. Even there, I think personalization with a fair amount of product gamification can play a long role before you get into strong affinities through data sciences, right? Personalizations can start. So today we are at the point that we have affinity, very strong affinity for category, subcategory, sub-subcategory level because of the number of interactions that are there. But even before that, start with the view of having some amount of personalization with just understanding your customer, maybe by asking them, right? Just preferences, trying to adhere to the preferences and doing some growth hacks that will ultimately lead to virality should be the first level of investment before you start getting into personalization through data. Because data requires the kind of volume. This one is the one that has the strongest feedback loop. You can keep dumping a lot of offers on a consumer. If those offers are not anything that the consumer wants, you're basically going to feed into your data science model wrong data about who is really converting on what, because it's really a force fit at a very large level. So trying to actually start getting some sort of engagement with the consumer when it comes to retention and not keeping it a one-way street, extremely important. The other part that is extremely important, one thing that worked for us and continues to be something that people call out when we actually have these case studies, is the fact that we don't ever have a business model or a model that is based on breakage or not using a particular offer, subsidy or incentive that we have given. In fact, we go over and beyond to ensure that we apply the best offer. As a product, we do not have a selection. You might have 5 offers on a particular transaction. We don't actually put the cognitive load of saying select which one you want. There are arguments to say that maybe a consumer wants X over Y. The fact is that 1, it is an offer. 2, if you're actually moving towards driving significant amount of interaction, they will consume the offers anyway. 3 is take that away and tell them that we have maximized benefit for you automatically, right? Whether it is about selecting their cashback amount automatically in the transactions and not asking them explicitly to select it, because cashback by definition is something that we can reclaim after expiry in a year, right? It is money that is going from, say, our pockets or a merchant's pocket. But the fact is, if I am subsidizing that or a merchant is subsidizing that on our platform, it is towards creating value for the consumer. So it should not be any breakage. We actually ensure that we always subtract it. So we have 0 breakage on our cashbacks. It's not a business model anyway to be able to say that you're not driving just perception, you are driving value. That is the most important thing, right? From offers, we auto-select and maximize for the user. So those are the kind of things from a product perspective extremely important if you want to actually drive the right retention. If we actually identify our habituals who are transacting at high velocity, farming their network with intelligence, and instead of actually suggesting to the person in the network, suggesting to this person to actually reach out to the network, extremely better. You can put a dumb referral to everybody, say that please refer, please refer, please refer. If you actually add a little bit of intelligence and tell a person that, hey, I see that Priya on your network seems to be a related, and you are actually sending so much money or something like that, would you want to actually talk to her about coming on PhonePe? Significantly more powerful message, right? And it doesn't take rocket science to actually determine what are the personas that are either related, are work colleagues, are friends, is staff, because pretty much people write all that. So they send money, they're writing everything. And a lot of the network. So the value of what we believe is the receiver network. We saw this from day one, that our receiver network, we were having our penetration on the remittance space and our penetration on tier 2 and tier 3, we actually owed not to the senders but to the receivers. There's a very strong receiver network. Like this morning, I think my wife sent some money to our maids, some relative in Orissa, right? First thing she did was check whether she's on PhonePe, when the number was not there, got the bank account, sent it, right? In the early days, we used to follow up that message to that person saying, onboard on PhonePe, etc. We used to get results, but not really that great results. Having a nudge through this person, in this case it was vocal, but to actually say that through the app, telling the person who's sending the money to have them come on board, much more valuable. And there is a value proposition even to the sender. Simple value proposition is, adding a bank account and sending money is like faceless. You have to hope that the bank account is right. Having the person on PhonePe automatically resolves the name to the banking system name and are able to verify that it's going to the right person. Very, very simple thing. And people get that. If you just tell them that if the person is on PhonePe, the guarantee that the money will go there is 100%. Not to say that's not 100% the other one, but you can't say that you may make a mistake. What you have to say is there's a guarantee, it is huge. So those are just the kind of use cases where we realize that creating champions out of our customer base to drive more word of mouth, again systemically and digitally, and also offline, by the way, we're experimenting on the offline space to be able to do this through our merchants, hugely valuable. This again applies, this one applies more at a broad level. While within category it can apply, this is the one that is probably at the broadest level where you can tell people that just get people on PhonePe. But start focusing on making everybody on your platform a champion for you versus trying to ask them who you should reach out to. That's all I have. Thank you.